It is 4 in the morning, and a wild scream cuts through the walls of my apartment building like a knife. A sharp, hysterical scream, full of rage. I hear violent pounding against my door. Thump, thump, thump. The neighbors are turning on their lights. Someone pokes their head into the hallway, and I, sitting in my living room with a cup of tea in my hands, do not move. Not 1 inch. Because I know exactly who is out there. And I know exactly why she is screaming. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, has just discovered that I changed the locks on my apartment. My apartment. The one I bought with 40 years of work. The one I paid for by cleaning offices at night, scrubbing floors at dawn, hauling trash bags that weighed more than my soul. This place is mine. And today, finally, I locked it again. But for you to understand why I got to this point, I need to tell you the whole story. I need you to know who I am, and who I thought my daughter-in-law was. My name is Grace. I am 66 years old. I have been a widow for 15 years. My husband died of a heart attack one winter night, without warning, without a goodbye. He left me alone with a 12-year-old son and a mountain of bills. I didn't have time to grieve. I had to clean. I had to work 3 shifts so that Mark, my son, could study, so he could have clean clothes, so he would never feel like he was missing anything. I raised him by myself, without help, without complaints, because that's what mothers do, right? We break ourselves in silence so they can grow up whole, and Mark grew up well. He graduated. He got a good job at a tech company. He met a girl, Chloe, a tall woman with a perfect smile and always immaculate nails. The first time I saw her, I thought, how elegant, how polite, how lucky my son is. When Mark told me they were getting married, I cried with happiness. Finally, I was going to have a complete family again. Finally, I was going to have someone else in this silent house. Because yes, they didn't have anywhere to live at first. They were saving money for their own place. And I, like the fool I was, opened my door wide. I told them to stay as long as they needed, that my house was their house. Mark hugged me. Chloe smiled, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought a mother should always help her children. Always. The first few months were good. Chloe cooked sometimes. She would ask me how my day was. She called me Mom with such affection. Mark worked a lot, came home late, but he always gave me a kiss on the forehead before going to sleep. I felt useful. I felt loved. I even started to think that maybe the loneliness was over forever. But then something changed. It was subtle at first. So subtle I didn't even notice. Chloe started moving things around. One day I came home, and my favorite vase, the one my husband gave me, was no longer on the table. It was stored in a closet. When I asked, she said, "Oh, Mom, it just looked so old-fashioned there. It doesn't match anything." She smiled. And I swallowed my discomfort, because I didn't want to seem difficult. I didn't want to seem like the bitter mother-in-law from the stories. Then it was my armchair, the armchair where I sat to watch TV every night. One day I arrived and there was a new piece of furniture in its place. Modern. Uncomfortable. Chloe explained that she had bought it because we needed to update the space a bit. We needed. As if this apartment belonged to both of them. As if she had the right to decide what stayed and what went. But I said nothing. Because Mark seemed happy. And I didn't want to ruin his happiness. So I smiled. I nodded. And I sat on that horrible piece of furniture that hurt my back. After that came the friends. Chloe started inviting her friends to my apartment. Without telling me, I would arrive from work, exhausted, with swollen feet, and find 4 women laughing in my living room, drinking wine, with loud music. The first time it happened, Chloe told me, "Oh, sorry, Mom, I forgot to tell you. But don't worry, we're almost leaving." But they didn't leave. They stayed until 11 o'clock at night. And I had to lock myself in my room because I couldn't even rest in my own house. The second time it happened, I tried to talk to Mark. I told him I would like them to let me know before bringing people over. He sighed. He looked at me with exhaustion, and he told me, "Mom, it's just for a little while. Don't be so strict. Chloe just wants to feel comfortable here." Feel comfortable. Those words stuck in me like needles. Because I wanted to feel comfortable too, in my own house. But apparently my comfort no longer mattered. What mattered was that Chloe was happy, that Chloe didn't feel uncomfortable, that Chloe could do whatever she wanted. And I, the owner of the apartment, the one who had paid every cent for this place, had to shut up and endure it. I had to be understanding. I had to be patient. Because if not, I would be the bad guy in the story, the problematic mother-in-law, the bitter old woman who doesn't let the young people live. But the worst was yet to come. Because one afternoon, when I returned from the grocery store, I found Chloe in my bedroom. In my bedroom. She was going through my closet, taking out my clothes. My dress is the wine-colored one, the sand-colored, the pearl gray. She was putting them in bags. When she saw me, she didn't startle. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me and said, "Mom, we need space for our things. You have too many old clothes. I'm going to donate these." Yes. And she held up a bag with my dresses inside. Dresses I had bought with my own money. Dresses that held memories. One was dark green. I wore it the day Mark graduated. Another was peach-colored. My husband gave it to me for our anniversary, and she was going to throw them away, as if they were trash, as if my life was trash. Something inside me broke in that moment. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just took the bag from her hands and said, in a calm voice, "Chloe, these are my clothes. And this is my room. Do not come in here again without my permission." She blinked. She looked at me as if I had just insulted her. And then she left the room without saying a word. That night, Mark came home furious. He told me I had made Chloe feel bad, that she was only trying to help, that I was being selfish. Selfish. Me. The one who had opened the doors of my home to them. The one who had given up my privacy, my peace, my space. And now it turned out I was the selfish one. I went to sleep crying that night. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely alone. That in my own house, I no longer had a voice or a vote, and that this was just the beginning. The weeks passed, and the situation worsened. Chloe no longer asked for permission for anything. She simply did what she wanted. One day I arrived, and she had turned the guest room into her personal dressing room. The entire room, filled with clothes, shoes, bags. She had removed the bed where Evelyn, my neighbor, slept when she came to visit me. She had thrown away the sheets I kept in there. And when I asked her what had happened, she looked at me with those cold eyes and said, "I just needed space for my things, Mom. You understand, right?" No, I didn't understand. But I no longer knew how to defend myself without seeming like the villain. Then the strange people started arriving. Chloe had started an online sales business, and she was using my apartment as a warehouse. Boxes and more boxes stacked in the hallway, in the living room, even in the kitchen. I was tripping over them every time I left my room. And when I complained, Mark told me, "Mom, it's temporary. She's building her future. Can't you support her a little?" Support her. I was already supporting her. I was giving her a roof over her head. But now I also had to put up with my house looking like a depot, with delivery drivers coming in and out at all hours, with strangers ringing my doorbell looking for packages. And the worst part is that Chloe never thanked me. Never. She acted as if all this was her right, as if I owed her something. One night, I arrived tired after cleaning 3 floors of offices. My knees hurt, my back hurt. I just wanted to get home, take a hot bath and go to bed. But when I opened the door, I found music blasting. There was a party in my living room. People I didn't know, drinking, laughing, smoking. The smoke hit my face as soon as I walked in. I froze in the entryway. Chloe was in the center, a glass in her hand, laughing with her friends. When she saw me, she waved her hand, as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, Mom, I didn't know you'd be home so early. We're celebrating. I made a lot of sales this week." And she kept laughing. No one greeted me. No one turned down the music. No one put out their cigarette. I felt invisible. In my own house, I was invisible. I locked myself in my room. I cried silently so they wouldn't hear me. And I listened to the party until 3 in the morning. Until they left. Until there was finally silence. The next day when I came out, I found my living room destroyed. Dirty glasses everywhere. Stains on the sofa. A broken bottle on the floor. And Chloe was sleeping peacefully in her room. She didn't clean anything. so I cleaned. As always. Because if I didn't do it, no one would. And because I was already used to cleaning up other people's messes. I had cleaned other people's offices for 40 years. Now I was cleaning up my daughter-in-law's mess in my own home. I tried to talk to Mark again. This time I sought him out at his job. I went all the way to his office. I needed him to listen to me without Chloe being present. I told him everything. I told him I couldn't take it anymore. That I needed my space. That I felt steamrolled in my own house. He listened to me, but when I finished speaking, he sighed deeply and told me, "Mom, I know it's hard, but we're saving money. We just need a few more months. Please, be patient." A few more months. They had already been living with me for a year and a half, and every day was worse. But I nodded. Because he was my son. Because I loved him. Because I didn't want to lose him. So I swallowed my pain once more and went home in silence. But then something happened that chilled my blood. One afternoon I came home from the market with heavy bags. I climbed the stairs slowly because the elevator was broken. And when I reached my floor, I heard voices in my apartment. Voices I didn't recognize. I opened the door carefully and froze. Chloe was with a man in a suit, elegant, with a briefcase. And they were walking through my living room as if they were at an exhibition. The man was taking notes, looking at the walls, measuring with his eyes. And then I heard the words that shattered me. "This apartment is a good size. Excellent location. It could sell easily for around $120,000. Maybe more." Chloe nodded. She smiled and said, "Perfect. You see, my mother-in-law is very old. She's going to need to move somewhere with more care soon. And we need our own space. You know, my mother-in-law is very old. As if I were a burden. As if I were a problem that needed to be solved. As if my life, my home, my refuge were something to be gotten rid of." I dropped the bags. The noise made them both turn around. Chloe turned pale for a second. Just a second. Then she recovered that fake smile and said, "Oh, Mom, you scared me. This is Mr. Davies. He's a real estate agent. He was just, giving me some advice. You know, for the future. For the future. My future. The future of my apartment, Mr." Davies looked at me uncomfortably, muttered something about a call he had to make, and left quickly. Chloe stood there, still smiling, as if she had done nothing wrong. I asked her what she was doing. She answered me calmly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Mom, I'm just planning. Mark and I have talked. You can't live alone forever. This place is too big for you. It would be better to sell it and move you somewhere more comfortable. With nurses, with people your age. A place with nurses, a nursing home. She wanted to put me in a nursing home and sell my apartment. The apartment I bought with my sweat, with my hands cracked from so much cleaning, with my sleepless nights working double shifts, and she wanted to take it from me. She wanted to kick me out of my own house and keep everything. I told her to leave. I told her to get out of my apartment immediately. She laughed. She laughed and told me, "Oh, Mom, don't be dramatic. I'm just thinking of what's best for you." And she went to her room, as if nothing, as if I had no right to be furious, as if my life was worth nothing. That night I waited for Mark. I told him everything. I showed him the business card the agent had left forgotten on the table. I told him Chloe was planning to sell my apartment without my permission. And do you know what he told me? Do you know what my son told me? My son whom I raised alone, to whom I gave everything. He told me, "Mom, it's not that serious. She was just exploring options. Maybe she's right. Maybe it would be better for you to be somewhere they can take care of you." In that moment, I knew I had lost him, that Chloe had poisoned him completely, that my son no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as a burden, as an obstacle, as something old that needed to be put on a shelf and forgotten. I went to my room without saying another word. I closed the door, and for the first time in many years I felt a deep hatred, not towards Mark, but towards myself, for having been so weak, for having allowed this to go so far, for having sacrificed my dignity, trying to be the perfect mother. But that night, something changed in me. Something hardened. Because I realized that if I didn't defend myself, no one would. And that the time had come to take back my life. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't had in months. I looked in the mirror and saw a tired woman. Wrinkled, but not defeated. Not yet. I was 66 years old, but I wasn't dead. And this apartment was mine. Legally mine. No one could take it from me. No one. Not even my own daughter-in-law with her fake smiles and her twisted plans. So I made a decision. I was going to fight back, but not by screaming, not by crying, but in the smartest way possible. With proof, with evidence, with the law on my side. Because if 40 years of cleaning offices had taught me anything, it was this. The powerful always have lawyers, and the weak have to be smarter. That afternoon, after work, I went to look for Evelyn, my neighbor from the 4th floor. Evelyn is 70 years old and has lived in this building longer than I have. She is a wise woman, the kind who sees everything without saying anything. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, she saw my face and knew immediately that something was wrong. She had me come in. She made me tea, and she listened. I told her everything, from the beginning. The changed furniture, the clothes she almost threw away, the parties, the real estate agent, everything. When I finished, Evelyn took my hand and told me something I will never forget. Grace, a mother's love doesn't mean letting yourself be trampled. It means teaching them respect. And you never taught your daughter-in-law where the boundaries are. Now you have to set them. Before it's too late, she asked me if I had any proof of what Chloe was doing. I told her no, that everything had been verbal, that I had nothing concrete. Evelyn thought for a moment and then told me, then get proof, record hair, take pictures, save messages, whatever it takes. Because if this goes legal, you're going to need more than your word. She was right, so I started. I bought a new phone with a better camera. I started documenting everything. Every box that arrived, every party, everything Chloe moved or changed without my permission. And most importantly, I started recording conversations. Not all of them, just the important ones. The ones that showed her real intentions. I didn't have to wait long. A week later, Chloe invited her friends over again. I was in my room, but I left the door ajar, and I recorded. I heard them talking, laughing, and then one of them asked her, "So when are you two moving into your own place?" Chloe laughed. That laugh I knew so well. And she replied, "Why? This place is already ours." Well, it's still in the old woman's name, but I'm working on that. Mark has almost convinced her to sign a power of attorney. Once we have that, we can do whatever we want. Sell, rent it out, whatever. And she can go to a nursing home. After all, she's not good for anything anymore, except cleaning. My heart stopped for a second. A power of attorney. They wanted me to sign a power of attorney. That meant they could make legal decisions for me. Sell my apartment. Manage my money. Everything. Without me being able to do anything. And Mark was in on the plan. My own son. The child I raised. The one I held in my arms when he cried. The one I fed with my own body when I didn't even have money for milk. He was planning to take everything from me. I kept recording. I recorded everything. Every poisonous word that came out of Chloe's mouth. Every cruel laugh. Every twisted plan. And when they finished and left, I saved that recording as if it were gold. Because it was. It was my weapon. My salvation. The next day, I went to look for a lawyer. I searched online. I read reviews. And I found one who had a good reputation and offered a free consultation. His name was Mr. Harrison, an older man, about 65 years old, with thick glasses and a kind smile. I went to his office with all my proof, the recordings, the photos, everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and told me, "Mrs. Grace, you are in danger. What your daughter-in-law is trying to do is called fraud. And if she manages to get you to sign that power of attorney under false pretenses, you could lose everything, legally." He explained that many elderly people fall into these traps, that they sign documents without understanding what they mean, that they trust their children or relatives and end up on the street, without a house, without money, without anything. He told me I had been lucky, that I had discovered the plan in time, and that now we had to act fast. I asked him what I could do. He told me that first, we needed to secure my apartment, that no one could sell or transfer it without my physical presence and my identification, that he would put alerts on the property deed, that I should change my passwords, that I should not sign anything, absolutely nothing, without consulting him first. He also suggested something else, something that at the time seemed extreme, but now I understand was necessary. He told me, "Mrs. Grace, you have the right to ask them to leave. This is your apartment. You did not sign any lease agreement with them. They are there out of your goodwill, and that goodwill can end whenever you decide. You can give them a 30-day notice. Or, if you feel in danger, you can change the locks. It is your legal right, change the locks." The idea terrified me, but it also liberated me, because it meant I had the power, that I could get my space back, my peace, my life. I left that office with a plan. Mr. Harrison gave me documents to sign, authorizations to protect my property. He gave me his personal number. He told me to call him if anything happened, and he told me something else, something that made me cry right there in his office. "You are not a bad mother for defending yourself. You are a smart mother, and your son needs to learn this lesson. Because if you don't teach it to him, life will teach it to him in a much harder way." He was right. Mark needed to wake up, and I needed to be strong. For the first time in my life, I needed to put my needs first, before my son's, before anyone else's. I returned home with a strange feeling, fear, but also something like hope. Chloe was in the living room with her boxes. She didn't even greet me. Mark wasn't there. He had gone to a work dinner. Perfect. I went into my room, I locked the door, and I started organizing everything. The documents Mr. Harrison had given me, the recordings, the photos, everything in a folder, everything labeled, everything ready for when I needed it, because I knew I was going to need it. I knew this was going to explode. But this time, I would be prepared. This time, I wasn't going to be the victim. I was going to be the one setting the rules. I barely slept that night. I stayed awake thinking about everything that had happened, about how I had gotten here, about how a woman who had worked her whole life, who had raised a son alone, who had fought against the world to survive, now had to fight against her own family to keep her home. It was unfair. It was painful. But it was real. And I wasn't going to run from that reality anymore. I was going to face it, with everything I had. Because if 40 years of scrubbing floors had taught me anything, it was this. Stains don't disappear on their own. You have to scrub them. You have to get them out, even if it hurts, even if it's tiring, even if you break your hands in the attempt. And Chloe was the biggest stain I had ever had to clean in my life. The next few days were an act. I pretended everything was normal. I smiled when I had to smile. I nodded when Chloe spoke. I didn't argue. I didn't complain. But inside, I was building my strategy, piece by piece. Every morning I left for work as usual. But some afternoons I didn't go straight home. I went to Mr. Harrison's office. We reviewed documents. We planned. He taught me things I never knew. How to protect my assets. How to prove someone was trying to defraud me. How to use the law in my favor. And most importantly, how not to let myself be emotionally manipulated. Because Chloe was an expert at that. At making me feel guilty. At making me feel like I was the problem. One afternoon, while I was cleaning an office downtown, I received a text from Mark. It said, "Mom, we need to talk. It's important. Tonight." My stomach twisted. I knew what was coming. I knew they were going to ask me to sign something. The famous power of attorney. Mr. Harrison had warned me this would happen, and he had told me exactly what to do. Don't show fear. Don't show anger. Just listen. And then say I needed time to think about it. That I wouldn't sign anything without reading it thoroughly. That it was my right. I took a deep breath. I put my phone away, and I kept cleaning, because cleaning had always calmed me. The repetitive motion, the smell of the soap, the shine of the floor after mopping. It made me feel like I still had control over something. I got home at 7 in the evening. Mark and Chloe were sitting in the living room, serious, as if they were about to give me bad news. I sat down across from them. Mark cleared his throat. He looked at Chloe. She nodded. And then he began. Mom, we've been thinking a lot about your future, about your well-being. We know you work hard, that you get tired, that you're not as young as you used to be. I said nothing. I just looked at him. He continued. We've seen some very nice residences, places where there are nurses all day, where you can do activities with people your age, where you don't have to worry about anything, and we think it would be good for you. Chloe chimed in with that syrupy voice I hated so much. Yes, Mom, it's just that we worry about you. What if you fall and you're alone? What if you get sick? We work all day. We can't take care of you the way you deserve. Take care of me. What an irony. They had never taken care of me. But I stayed quiet. I waited. And then Mark took out some papers. He put them on the table and said, to make the transition easier, we need you to sign this. It's a power of attorney, so we can handle the sale of the apartment and all the paperwork. That way you don't have to worry about anything legal. We'll take care of everything. There it was. The plan in black and white. They wanted me to sign away my life, my home, my future, everything into their hands. I looked at the papers. Then I looked at them, and with the calmest voice I could muster, I said, I need to read this carefully and consult with someone. I don't sign anything without fully understanding what it means. Chloe's face changed immediately. Her smile vanished, and she said in a harder tone, consult with who? We're your family. Don't you trust us? There it was. The manipulation, the guilt. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I took a deep breath and said, it's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of responsibility. These are legal documents. I need to understand them well. Mark got upset. I saw his jaw tighten. Mom, don't make this difficult. It's just a piece of paper. To help you. To help me. To rob me, you mean. But I didn't say it. I just repeated. I need time. 1 week. To read it properly. Chloe stood up abruptly. She grabbed the papers angrily and said, you're unbelievable. We offer you help and you treat us like criminals. You're so ungrateful. And she went to her room, slamming the door. Mark looked at me with disappointment. He said nothing. He just shook his head and went after her. I was left alone in the living room, shaking, but also feeling something strange. Pride, because I hadn't given in. I hadn't signed. I had said no, and that was a power I had forgotten I had. That night I heard Chloe screaming from her room. I didn't understand everything she was saying, but I heard words like stubborn, old, stupid. I heard Mark trying to calm her down. And then I heard something that broke my heart. Chloe said, if she doesn't sign, we have to get her out another way. We can't keep waiting. This apartment is worth a lot of money, and I'm not going to lose it because of your mother. And Mark said nothing. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend me. There was only silence. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. My son was no longer on my side. Maybe he never really was. Maybe he had only ever been on the side of his own comfort. The next morning I called Mr. Harrison. I told him what had happened. He told me I had done exactly the right thing, that I should not sign anything, ever, and that now we had to speed up the plan. He asked me if I was ready to take the next step, to change the locks, to reclaim my space, to legally evict them from my apartment. I told him yes, that I was ready, that I couldn't live like this anymore, that I would rather be alone than feel invaded in my own home. He told me he would get me a trusted locksmith, that we would do it on a day when Mark and Chloe were both out, that it would be quick and legal, and that he would be there with me for anything. We chose the day, a Friday. Mark had a work conference that lasted all day. Chloe had mentioned she was going to see her mother in the afternoon. It would be the perfect time. Mr. Harrison coordinated everything. The locksmith would arrive at 2 in the afternoon. I would call in sick to work, and by 4 in the afternoon, my apartment would have new locks. No one could get in without my permission. No one. The idea filled me with terror. But it also gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Because for the first time in a long time, I was going to decide who entered my life and who stayed out. The preceding days were agonizing. Chloe acted as if nothing had happened. She kept moving through my house as if it were hers. She kept bringing in boxes. She kept making plans. One day I heard her on the phone with someone talking about remodeling the kitchen, my kitchen. She talked about colors, about new cabinets, about changing everything, as if I no longer existed, as if I were already gone. And maybe in her mind I was. Maybe she had already erased me, but I was still here, and soon she was going to find that out in the worst possible way. Thursday night, I could hardly sleep. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that was going to happen, about how they would react, about whether Mark would ever forgive me, about whether I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered Evelyn's words. A mother's love doesn't mean letting yourself be trampled, and I remembered Mr. Harrison's words. You are not a bad mother for defending yourself. And I remembered something more important. I remembered the woman I was before all this. The woman who worked 3 shifts. The one who raised a son alone. The one who fought the world without giving up. That woman was still inside me. She had just been asleep, waiting for the moment to wake up. And tomorrow she was going to wake up roaring. Friday arrived. I got up early, earlier than usual. I made coffee. I drank it, looking out the window. The sun was just rising. Everything was quiet, peaceful. It was ironic, because in a few hours everything was going to explode. Mark left at 7. He gave me a kiss on the forehead, as always. He didn't know it would be the last kiss he would give me in a long time. Chloe left at 9. She didn't even say goodbye. She just grabbed her bag and left. I heard the door close. I heard her footsteps fading down the hall. And then I breathed. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath without feeling like someone was watching me, without feeling like someone was judging every move I made. I called work. I told them I was sick, that I couldn't come in. It sounded believable because my voice was trembling. But it wasn't from sickness. It was from fear, from nerves, from anticipation. Then I called Mr. Harrison. I told him they were gone, that the coast was clear. He told me the locksmith would arrive in an hour, that I should prepare, that I should take anything of value I had in shared spaces, that I should put it safely in my room, just in case. I obeyed. I went through my house gathering my things. My husband's vase, the family photos that were still on the walls, my box of memories that I kept in a living room closet. I put everything in my bedroom, and with every object I saved, I felt as if I were saving pieces of my soul. At 2 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was the locksmith, a young man, polite. He showed me his identification. I explained the situation briefly. He nodded. He told me he had seen cases like this before, that I shouldn't worry, that in half an hour everything would be ready. He started to work. I sat on the sofa, watching him, listening to the metallic sounds of the tools, the drill, the new pieces fitting into place. Every sound was a release. Every new piece was a shield, a barrier, a way of saying, this is mine, and no one else is getting in without my permission. 30 minutes later, he handed me 2 sets of new keys. He explained how they worked. He assured me that no one with the old keys could open the door. He wished me luck, and he left. I stood in front of the door, with the new keys in my hand, shiny, heavy, powerful. I clutched them to my chest. And I cried. I cried with relief. I cried with fear. I cried with guilt. But most of all, I cried with freedom. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like my house was mine again, that I was the owner of my life again. I dried my tears, took a deep breath, and then I started to prepare for what was coming. Because I knew that when Chloe arrived and saw she couldn't get in, she was going to cause a scene, a monumental scene, and I had to be ready. Mr. Harrison arrived at 4. He knocked with the code we had agreed upon. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. I opened. He came in with his briefcase. He asked me how I felt. I told him the truth. Terrified but firm. He smiled. He told me that was normal, That the important thing was not to doubt now. That this was legal. That it was my right. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. A letter he had drafted. It was a formal notification. It said that Mark and Chloe had 30 days to vacate the apartment. That any attempt to enter without my permission would be considered trespassing. That I could call the police if necessary. He told me that when they arrived and couldn't get in, I should give them that letter. Under the door. Without opening it. Without arguing. Just the letter and silence. He explained that they would probably try to manipulate me. That they would scream. That they would cry. That Mark would say painful things to me. That Chloe would call me a monster. But that I must not open that door. That I must not give in. That if I gave in, it would all have been in vain. He made me promise I wouldn't open it. I promised him. Even though my heart was already breaking just thinking about Mark's face when he saw he couldn't get in. Mr. Harrison stayed with me until 6. We drank tea. We talked about unimportant things. I think he was doing it to distract me. To calm my nerves. And it worked a little. At 6, he left. He gave me his number again. He told me to call him if anything happened. Anything. And he left me alone. Alone with my new keys. Alone with my decision. Alone with my fear. The hours passed slowly. So slowly. I sat in my living room, now silent. No boxes. No strangers. No loud music. Just me. And the silence. A beautiful silence. A silence I had forgotten the sound of. I turned on the television. I watched the news. But I wasn't paying attention. My mind was on the door, waiting, knowing that at any moment, it was all going to explode. And then, at 11 at night, I heard the elevator. I heard footsteps. I heard voices. Mark and Chloe. They were arriving. My heart started beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I heard them approach. I heard the key enter the lock. And then I heard the sound that would change everything. The sound of a key that doesn't work. That turns but doesn't open. That gets stuck. That doesn't fit. There was silence. Then I heard Chloe say, "What's wrong? Why won't it open?" Mark tried again. Nothing. He tried again. And again. And again. And then I heard his voice, confused, worried. "It's not working. The key isn't working." Chloe tried her key. Nothing either. And that's when it started. First, it was confusion. Then, it was panic. And finally, it was fury. Chloe started banging on the door. "Mom, open the door. The key isn't working. Open up." I didn't move. I stayed seated on my sofa, with the envelope in my hands, breathing. Just breathing. The pounding got louder, more desperate. "Grace, open this door right now." "What did you do? Did you change the locks? Are you crazy?" Mark started pounding too. "Mom, open up. What's going on? Mom, please." His voice broke me. It split me in two. But I didn't get up. I didn't go to the door. I stayed there, firm, remembering everything that had happened, everything they had done to me, everything they had planned to do to me. And then Chloe lost control completely. She started screaming like she had never screamed before. "Open this damn door. This is my house. All my things are in there. You can't do this to us. This is illegal." And she pounded. She pounded so hard I thought she would break the door. The neighbors' lights started turning on. I heard doors opening. Someone asked what was happening. Chloe screamed at them that I had thrown them out on the street, that I had changed the locks without telling them, that I was a crazy old woman. And then came the scream that woke up the whole building, the scream that made the dogs bark, the scream that cut through the walls like a knife. Chloe screamed with all her soul, "Grace, you are going to regret this. I swear you are going to regret this." And she kept pounding. Mark tried to calm her, but she was out of control. And then he exploded too. He started shouting, "Mom, how could you? Who gave you permission? Open this door now. You can't do this to us. I'm your son." And those words hurt me more than anything else. Because he was right. He was my son. The son I raised. The son I loved. And now he was on the other side of the door screaming at me, as if I were his enemy. I stood up. I walked to the door, with the envelope in my hand. And I slid it underneath. In silence, the envelope appeared on the other side of the door. There was a brief silence. I heard someone pick it up. Then I heard the sound of paper tearing open, and then I heard Mark's voice reading aloud. First in silence, then in a low voice, and finally aloud so Chloe could hear. Eviction notice. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. Any unauthorized attempt to enter will be reported to the authorities. Signed, Grace Herrera. Chloe exploded again. But this time it wasn't just fury. It was hysteria. It was panic. Because she had just realized that she had lost. That her plan had failed. That I was not the foolish old woman she thought I was. This can't be real. This isn't legal. You can't just kick us out like this. We live here. We have rights. She screamed, her voice breaking. She hit the door, but no longer with force. Now, they were desperate hits, from someone who knows they've lost. Mark tried to speak. His voice was different. Softer. More broken. Mom, please, let's talk. Open the door. We can solve this. It doesn't have to be this way. But I didn't answer. I stayed on the other side, with my back against the door, feeling every blow as if it were against my own heart. But I didn't give in. I didn't open. Because if I opened it at that moment, everything would have been in vain. All the pain, all the fear, all the courage I had gathered to get here, it would have been lost in a second of weakness. I heard Evelyn come out of her apartment. Her voice was calm but firm. It's midnight. You are waking up the entire building. If you don't quiet down, I'm going to call the police. Chloe turned on her. This isn't your problem, you nosy old woman. Mind your own business. But Evelyn didn't flinch. My business is being able to sleep in peace. And you are disturbing the peace. You have two options. You quiet down. Or I call the police. You decide. Mark intervened. Mrs. Evelyn, please. It's a misunderstanding. My mother locked us out. We need to get in. Evelyn looked at him. And with a voice I had never heard from her, she said, Mark, I've known your mother since she moved into this building. She is a good woman. And if she locked you out, it's because she had her reasons. Good reasons. Now, please leave, or I'm making the call. There was more silence. And then I heard Chloe's footsteps moving away, going down the stairs. She didn't wait for the elevator. She just ran down, like a wounded animal. Mark stayed a moment longer. I heard him breathing on the other side of the door. Heavy, tired, defeated. And then he spoke. But this time he didn't shout. He spoke low. So low I had to get close to the door to hear him. Mom, I don't understand why you did this. I thought you loved me. I thought I could always count on you. But I guess I was wrong. And then he left. I heard his footsteps moving away too. Slow, heavy. And when the silence finally came, I collapsed. I fell to the floor, with my back against the door. And I cried. I cried, as I hadn't cried in years, because I had just lost my son. Or maybe I had just realized that I had lost him a long time ago. I don't know how long I was there, on the floor, crying. But at some point, I heard a soft knock on my door. Evelyn's code. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. I got up. I dried my face. I opened. She came in without a word. She hugged me, and I cried again. But this time in the arms of someone who understood me, someone who knew how hard this had been. We sat on the sofa. Evelyn made me tea, as she always did. And when I could finally speak, I said, "Did I do the right thing?" She took my hand. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Grace, you did the only thing you could do. Defend yourself. That is never wrong. Never." She told me she had heard everything, that the other neighbors had too, that everyone knew what Chloe had been doing, that they had seen her coming and going with boxes, with strange people, that they had heard the parties, the shouting, that everyone knew but no one knew how to help me, and that now everyone was on my side. That if I needed witnesses for anything legal, she would be the first to testify. Those words gave me a strength I didn't know I needed, because I realized I wasn't alone, that there were people who saw me, who supported me, who understood my pain. Evelyn stayed with me until 2 in the morning, And when she left, I felt a little less broken, a little less alone. I went to bed, but couldn't sleep. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mark, about his face when he was a child, about how he would hug me when he was scared, about how he used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. Where had that boy gone? When had he become the man shouting at me from the other side of the door? When had he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle? I had no answers. I only had questions and pain. A lot of pain. But I also had something else. I had my house back. I had my peace. I had my dignity. And that had to be enough. For now, the following days were strange. The house was silent. An absolute silence. There was no music, no shouting, no boxes, no strange people, just me. And at first, that silence scared me, because I had wanted it so much that when I finally had it, I didn't know what to do with it. I would sit in my living room and just listen. The refrigerator, the cars on the street, the birds in the morning, simple sounds, sounds I had forgotten existed. And slowly, I began to heal, to recover, to remember what it was like to live without fear, without anxiety, without the constant feeling of being invaded. But Mark didn't give up. He started calling me, 10 times a day, 20. I didn't answer. Then the texts started. At first they were furious. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Open the door. We need to talk. You can't do this to us. I'm going to get a lawyer." But I didn't respond. Mr. Harrison had told me not to, that any communication had to be in writing and through him, to protect myself, to have everything documented. Then the messages changed. They became softer, more manipulative. "Mom, I miss you. I don't understand what I did wrong. I always loved you. Why are you doing this to me?" And those messages hurt more, because they touched the deepest wound, the guilt, that mother's guilt that never goes away. That voice that tells you that maybe you are the bad one, maybe you overreacted, maybe you should forgive. But then I would remember. I remembered Chloe with the real estate agent. I remembered the plans to put me in a nursing home. I remembered the power of attorney they wanted me to sign. I remembered every humiliation, every lack of respect, every moment I felt invisible in my own home. And the guilt would fade, because what I did wasn't cruelty. It was survival. It was self-love. It was justice. One afternoon, while cleaning my house, I found something under the sofa. A toy, a small car. From when Mark was a child, I picked it up. I cleaned it. And I sat with it in my hands. I remembered when I gave it to him. He was 5 years old. He was so happy. He played with that car for years. And now here it was, forgotten, under a sofa, like our relationship. Forgotten, buried, broken. I cried again. But this time it was different. I didn't cry for what I did. I cried for what I lost. Because the truth is, I didn't lose my son when I changed the locks. I lost him long before that. I lost him when he stopped listening to me. When he chose Chloe over me in every argument. When he stopped seeing me as a person with feelings and started seeing me as someone he could take advantage of. Changing the locks only made a loss that had already occurred visible. And accepting that was the most painful part of all. I put the car away. I put it in my box of memories, along with the photos, along with the old letters, along with everything that was left of the boy I raised, because the man he became was no longer mine. And maybe he never really was. A week passed. Then, too, Mark's messages became less frequent, the calls too. And one day, they just stopped. Total silence. And I don't know if that gave me relief or broke me more, because it meant he had given up, that he had chosen Chloe, that he had chosen resentment, and that I would have to learn to live with that choice. But it also meant I was free, that I could start over, that I could rebuild my life without fear, without invasion, without manipulation. And although it hurt, although I woke up at night with a tight chest, I knew I had done the right thing. Because sometimes loving means letting go, and sometimes surviving means closing doors. Even if they are the doors to your own son. 3 weeks after changing the locks, I received a call from Mr. Harrison. He told me that Mark had contacted a lawyer, that they were trying to prove I had no right to kick them out, that they had lived there for over a year, and that gave them tenants' rights. My heart sped up. I asked him if they could win. Mr. Harrison laughed. A soft but confident laugh. He told me no, that they never paid rent, that there was no contract, that they lived there out of my goodwill, and that goodwill had ended, that any judge would be on my side, especially with the proof we had. The recordings, the photos, the testimonies. He told me not to worry, that he would handle everything, and that I would probably receive a letter from Mark's lawyer in a few days, that I should not respond, that I should send it to him directly, and so I did. The letter arrived 4 days later. It was long, full of legal words I barely understood. But the message was clear. Mark was accusing me of emotional abandonment, of cruelty, of throwing them out on the street without justification. He said he had taken care of me for years, that he had supported me, that I was acting irrationally due to my advanced age, that I probably needed psychiatric help. Every word was a knife, because my own son was using my age as a weapon. He was telling a judge that I was senile, that I didn't know what I was doing, that I needed someone else to make decisions for me. It was exactly what Chloe had planned from the beginning, and now Mark was executing it. I sent the letter to Mr. Harrison. He read it, and he called me 2 hours later. He was angry. I could hear it in his voice. He told me that letter was an insult, that it was pure manipulation, but that it was also a blessing, because now we had written proof of their intentions, of how they saw me, of how they planned to declare me incompetent to take my property. He told me he was going to respond to that letter with all the evidence we had, with the recordings where Chloe talked about the power of attorney, with the photos of the real estate agent in my apartment, with everything, and that when he was finished, any judge would see exactly who the victim was here. I felt relieved, but also deeply sad, because this was no longer a family fight. This was a legal battle. Cold, impersonal, painful. The days turned into weeks. I continued with my routine. I worked. I cleaned offices. I came home. But now my home was different. It was mine again. Slowly, I began to reclaim the spaces. I took out the horrible furniture Chloe had brought in. I put it in the trash. I put my old armchair back, the one I liked, the one that was comfortable. I rearranged the living room as it was before. I put my photos back on the walls, my vase on the table. Every change was a liberation. It was like removing layers of dirt I didn't know I was carrying. And little by little, my apartment began to feel like a home again, not like a battlefield. Evelyn came to visit me often. We drank tea, we talked. She told me stories about her own children, about how children sometimes disappoint, about how sometimes love is not enough, and her words comforted me, because they made me feel less alone in this pain. They made me understand that I wasn't the only mother who had had to make difficult decisions, that I wasn't the only one who had to choose between her son and her own survival, and that choosing survival didn't make me a bad mother. It made me human. It made me strong. It made me brave. One day, while I was cleaning an office, I found a magazine. It was open to an article about family abuse. It talked about how many elderly people suffer abuse from their own children. Economic abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And I read every word as if they were talking about me, about my situation, about what I had lived through, and I realized something important. I did not exaggerate. I was not cruel. I was a victim who found the strength to fight back. And that was something I should be proud of, not ashamed. I saved that article. I took it home, and I put it in my folder of documents, not to show it to anyone, just to remind myself on the difficult days that what I lived through was real, that I didn't imagine it, that I wasn't crazy. The first month passed, then the second. And then Mr. Harrison called me with news. Mark's lawyer had withdrawn the case. They were not going to continue with the lawsuit. When I asked why, Mr. Harrison explained that they probably saw the evidence he sent, and they realized they had no case. That any judge would see the recordings and understand exactly what was happening, that fighting this would only make them look worse, and that Chloe had probably decided it was better to cut her losses and move on. I felt relieved, but also empty, because this meant that Mark had chosen. He had chosen not to fight for our relationship. He had chosen to give up. He had chosen Chloe over me once again. And even though it was what I expected, it hurt to confirm it. Mr. Harrison also told me something else. He said that during the legal process, he had done a little more research, and he had discovered that Chloe had a history, that she had done something similar with her previous family. With her first partner, she had tried to take properties that weren't hers. She had manipulated. She had lied. And when she was discovered, she simply left and found another victim. Mark was just another victim, and I had been the obstacle she needed to remove. Hearing that gave me a mix of emotions. On one hand, it confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts were correct, but on the other hand, it meant my son had been manipulated, deceived, used, and that hurt in a different way, because it meant that maybe he was a victim too, but a victim who chose not to see the truth. I tried to contact him once. After learning all this, I sent him a message. Simple, direct. Mark, I need you to know something important about Chloe. Please call me. I waited. 1 day, 2 days, a week. He never responded. And that's when I understood that he had already made his decision, that he had chosen to believe her, that he had chosen to see me as the villain, and that there was nothing I could do to change that. The truth didn't matter. The facts didn't matter, because love is blind. And sometimes love makes us choose the wrong people and defend the indefensible. Mark had chosen his path, and I had to accept it, even if it tore me apart inside. The months passed. Winter arrived, and with it came a strange peace, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I woke up without anxiety, without fear of finding someone in my space, without fear that something else in my life would be taken without my permission. My apartment smelled different now. It smelled like coffee in the mornings, soup in the afternoons. Clean. Mine. I started doing things I had stopped doing. I planted flowers on my balcony. I bought new cushions for the sofa. I painted one wall of my room a soft peach color that I had always liked. Small changes, small ways of reclaiming my space, my life, my identity. Evelyn introduced me to a group of women from the building. We met on Thursdays. We played cards. We drank tea. We talked. And I realized that many of them had similar stories. Children who didn't call, complicated families, disappointments. But they also had laughter. They had friendship. They had life. And they taught me something important. That family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is in who chooses to stay, who chooses to see you, who chooses to care for you. And these women had become my family, my support network, my refuge. One night, while watching television, I saw a news story. An elderly woman had been scammed by her own daughter. They had taken her house, her savings, everything, and they had left her on the street. The woman cried in the interview. She said she never thought her daughter would do that to her, that she trusted, that she loved, and that she lost everything. And as I watched her cry, I realized something. I could have been her, if I hadn't acted, if I hadn't changed those locks. If I had signed that power of attorney, I would be on the street right now, homeless, with nothing. And Mark and Chloe would be living in my apartment, enjoying what I built, without remorse, without guilt. And that realization removed the last trace of guilt that remained, because I understood that I didn't just save my apartment, I saved my life. 6 months after changing the locks, my life had found a new rhythm. I woke up early. I did light exercise, just stretches and walks in the park near my house, something I never had time to do when Chloe and Mark lived with me. I ate breakfast in peace. I read the newspaper. Small things, simple things, but they filled me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I worked my shifts. I came home, and my house welcomed me with silence, a silence that no longer scared me, a silence that had become my best companion, because in that silence, I could hear myself. I could think. I could heal. Evelyn organized a small dinner at her apartment. She invited the women from the Thursday group. And me. It was beautiful. Homemade food. Laughter. Stories. And at one point in the evening, Evelyn raised her glass and said, "I want to toast to Grace for her courage, for teaching us that it's never too late to defend ourselves, for reminding us that self-love is not selfishness, it's survival." Everyone toasted, and I cried, but this time, not from sadness, from gratitude. Because these women saw me, they valued me, they respected me, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt part of something, of a community, of a chosen family, and that healed wounds I didn't even know I had. One afternoon, while cleaning an office downtown, I received a call from an unknown number. I usually didn't answer unknown numbers, but something made me respond. It was a woman's voice, young, nervous. "Mrs. Grace, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Sarah. I'm a friend of Mark's. I need to talk to you. It's urgent." My heart stopped. I asked her what was wrong. She hesitated, and then said, "It's about Chloe. You need to know the truth. Can we meet?" I agreed. We arranged to meet the next day at a coffee shop near my house. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was spinning. What truth? What had happened? Was Mark okay? Unanswered questions kept me awake until dawn. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I ordered a tea. I sat at a table in the back, and I waited. Sarah arrived on time. She was a woman in her 30s, elegant, with sad eyes. She sat across from me, ordered a coffee, and then she started talking. She told me she knew Mark from work, that they had been friends for years, that she had known Chloe from the beginning, and that she had never liked her, that she always saw something false in her, something calculating. But she never said anything because it wasn't her place. She told me that after Mark and Chloe left my apartment, things had gotten worse, that they had rented a small place, that Mark was working double to pay the rent, that Chloe continued with her business but spent everything on clothes and luxuries, that they fought constantly. Sarah looked me in the eyes and said, "Mrs. Grace, Chloe cheated on Mark several times. And when he found out, she convinced him it was his fault, that he didn't pay attention to her, that he worked too much. Mark forgave her, because he's trapped, because she manipulates him. Just like she manipulated you." I felt a deep pain in my chest. For my son, for what he was going through. But Sarah wasn't finished. She continued. "And 2 weeks ago, Mark called me crying. He told me Chloe left, that she left him, that she took everything of value he had, his savings, his computer, his expensive clothes, everything, and she disappeared. Mark is destroyed, he's alone, and he's starting to realize everything. How she used him, how she used both of you." I asked her why she was telling me this. She sighed. "Because Mark isn't going to call you. He has too much pride, too much shame, but he needs his mother. He's broken, and I know you're hurt too, but I thought you should know. That you should have the choice to decide what to do with this information." I thanked her. I told her I needed time to process it. She nodded. She gave me her number, and she left. I stayed sitting in that coffee shop for another hour, with my cold tea, looking out the window, processing, feeling, trying to understand what to do with all this. Part of me wanted to run and find Mark, hug him, tell him everything would be okay. But another part of me, the part that was still healing, told me to wait, that this was not my responsibility, that Mark needed to learn this lesson alone. That night I spoke with Evelyn. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she told me something I'll never forget. "Grace, the fact that Chloe left him doesn't erase what Mark did to you. It doesn't erase the screaming. It doesn't erase his lawyer's letter. It doesn't erase that he chose to believe her over you. You can have compassion for his pain, but you don't have to rescue him. He is an adult, and the consequences of his choices are his, not yours." She was right. And even though it hurt, Even though my mother's heart wanted to run and save him, my head knew I couldn't, that I shouldn't. Because if I did, I would be teaching him that he can treat me badly and I will always be there. And that was not the lesson I wanted to give him. 2 weeks passed. And then I received a message. From Mark. It was the first time he had written to me in months. The message said, "Mom, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I hurt you, but I need to talk to you. Please." My first instinct was to respond immediately, but I stopped myself. I breathed. And I called Mr. Harrison. I told him the situation. I asked him what I should do. He told me, "Mrs. Grace, you can talk to him if you want, but set boundaries. Meet in a public place, not at your apartment, and don't promise anything. Just listen. See if there is real remorse or just need." I followed his advice. I responded to Mark. I told him we could meet at a coffee shop. The next day, at 3 in the afternoon, he accepted. I arrived at the coffee shop nervous. I hadn't seen Mark in 6 months. I didn't know how I was going to react, how I was going to feel. I sat down and waited. He arrived 10 minutes late, and when I saw him, I lost my breath. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He had dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled. He looked tired, broken. He sat across from me. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at me, and then I saw something in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Guilt, remorse, pain. He started to speak, his voice breaking. "Mom, I don't even know where to begin. I've been an idiot, a horrible son. I treated you badly. I accused you of terrible things, and all because I was blind, because I didn't want to see the truth about Chloe." He kept talking. He told me everything, how Chloe had manipulated him, how she had convinced him that I was the problem, how she had lied to him about so many things, how she had used him, and how she had finally left him with nothing. He cried. My adult son cried in front of me like he did when he was a child, and my heart broke. But I didn't move. I didn't hug him. I didn't console him, because I needed to hear more. I needed to know if he really understood what he had done to me, or if he was just looking for comfort because Chloe had left him. I asked him directly, "Mark, if Chloe hadn't left you, would you be here right now? Would you have realized anything?" He fell silent. He thought, and then with brutal honesty, he said, "Probably not." And that kills me inside, because it means I needed to lose everything to realize what I had, to realize what I did to you. That honesty hurt me, but it also gave me hope, because it meant he was being real. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was truly facing his mistakes. I asked him what he expected from me, what he wanted. He took a deep breath and said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to take me back. I just needed to tell you I'm sorry, that you were right about everything, that I should have listened to you, that I should have defended you, and that losing your trust is the highest price I've ever paid in my life. Higher than losing Chloe, higher than losing the money. Losing you was the worst, and it was my fault." His words reached me deep down, because they were the words I had needed to hear. Not excuses, not justifications, just responsibility, just truth. I told him I appreciated his honesty, that I appreciated his apology, but that I couldn't just forget everything that happened, that I needed time, that I needed to see actions, not just words, that I needed to rebuild the trust that was broken, and that it wouldn't happen overnight. He nodded. He told me he understood, that he wouldn't ask for more than I was willing to give, that he would respect my timeline, that if one day I could forgive him, it would be a gift he didn't deserve. We sat in silence for a moment, and then I asked him, "Are you okay? Do you have a place to live?" He nodded. He told me he was renting a small room, that he was working hard to recover, that he was in therapy, that he was trying to understand how he had gotten so far, how he had lost so much of himself. We said goodbye at the coffee shop. There was no hug, no promises, just a silent understanding that this was just the beginning of something new, or maybe the definitive end. I didn't know yet, and it was okay not to know. I went home with mixed feelings. Relief at having heard a real apology, sadness for all that had been lost, and caution. A lot of caution. Because words are easy, actions are what count, and I needed to see if Mark had really changed, or if he was just hurt and vulnerable. Time would tell, and I had all the time in the world. Because now my time was mine. My life was mine, and no one would take it from me again. The weeks passed. Mark would send me messages from time to time, never asking for anything, just sharing how he was, that he had finished a project at work, that he had gone to the park we used to visit when he was a kid, that he was reading a book I had recommended to him years ago. Small messages, small windows into his life. I would respond, briefly, kindly but with distance. Because I was still protecting my peace, I was still healing, and I wasn't going to rush that process for anyone, not even for my own son. Evelyn asked me once if I was going to forgive him. I told her I didn't know. That forgiveness wasn't a switch I could turn on and off, that it was a process, long, painful, complicated, and that maybe it would never fully arrive, and that was okay, that I could live with that uncertainty. 3 months after our meeting at the coffee shop, Mark asked to see me again. This time, he had something to show me. I agreed. We met at the same place. He arrived with a box. A cardboard box full of things. He put it on the table, and he started taking out objects. My vase. The one Chloe had stored in the closet. Family photos that had disappeared. My old sheets. The blanket my husband gave me. Things I thought I had lost forever. I asked him how he had them. He explained that when Chloe left, she had left several boxes behind. Boxes with things she had taken from my apartment without my permission. Things she planned to sell or throw away. Mark had saved them. He had cleaned them. He had protected them. And now he was returning them to me. It's not enough to make up for everything, he said, but I wanted you to have back what was always yours. I took the vase in my hands. I wiped it with my sleeve. And the tears began to fall. Because it wasn't just a vase. It was a piece of my husband, a piece of my history, a piece of me that I thought I had lost. I looked at Mark, and for the first time in months, I saw my son. Not the man who had screamed at me, not the man who had chosen Chloe over me, but the boy I raised, the boy who loved me, the boy who was still in there somewhere, under all the pain and mistakes. I thanked him, my voice breaking, and for the first time since changing the locks, I felt that maybe there was hope. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe we could rebuild something, different from what we had before, stronger, more honest, more real. Mark started visiting me once a month, always in public places, never at my apartment. I still wasn't ready for that, and he respected it. We talked about simple things. Work, the weather, movies. We never forced deep conversations. We just let the relationship rebuild itself naturally, slowly, like a plant that had been ripped out by the roots and was now trying to grow again. It was fragile, it was delicate, but it was real, and that was enough for now. Evelyn told me she was proud of me, that I was handling the situation with wisdom, that I wasn't giving in too quickly, but I wasn't closing the door completely either, that I was finding a balance. And she was right. I was learning something new, that a mother's love doesn't mean sacrificing everything. It means setting healthy boundaries. It means teaching respect. It means taking care of myself so I can care for others. 1 year after changing the locks, something extraordinary happened. Mark invited me to dinner, to a nice restaurant. I arrived nervous. I didn't know what to expect. He was already seated when I arrived. He looked different, better, healthier, more at peace. We sat down. We ordered food. And then he took something out of his pocket. It was a key, a simple key. He handed it to me. I asked him what it was. He smiled sadly and said, "It's the key to my new apartment, a place I paid for myself, with my job, without anyone's help. I want you to have it, not because I expect you to come, but because I want you to know that there's always a place for you in my life. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." I took the key. I looked at it, and I felt something strange. Pride. Pride in my son. In his growth. In his effort. In his independence. I told him I was proud of him, that I could see how much he had changed, how much he had worked on himself. And then I did something I hadn't done in a year. I hugged him. It was a short hug, timid, but real. And when we pulled apart, I saw tears in his eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. "Thank you for teaching me the hardest, but most important, lesson of my life." I told him that children don't come with an instruction manual, that we had both made mistakes, that we had both learned, and that this wasn't a perfect happy ending. It was simply a new beginning, a more honest one, a healthier one where we both knew our boundaries and respected them. In the following months, our relationship continued to improve. Slowly but steadily, Mark invited me to his apartment. I went. It was small but clean, organized. His. There was no trace of Chloe, no trace of the past. Just a man building his life from scratch. He cooked for me. A simple meal, pasta with tomato sauce. The same kind I used to make him when he was a child. And as we ate, we talked about things we had never talked about his fears, about his regrets, about how Chloe had filled a void he didn't even know he had, and about how losing me almost destroyed him. I told him about my process, about the fear I felt, about the loneliness after changing the locks, about the nights spent crying, wondering if I had done the right thing, about Evelyn and the women in the building who became my family. Mark asked me if he could ever come back to my apartment. I told him I didn't know, that this space was still my sanctuary, my refuge, and that I needed to keep it that way for now. He understood. He didn't push. He just said that when I was ready, he would be there, and that in the meantime he would keep showing me with actions that he had changed, that he was trustworthy again, that he deserved a second chance, not with words, with deeds. That night when I returned home, I sat in my living room, in my old armchair, looking at my apartment, the walls I had reclaimed, the space I had defended, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, complete peace, because I had won. I hadn't won a war against my son. I had won a war for myself, for my dignity, for my right to exist in my own space without fear. 2 years after changing the locks, my life was completely different. I still worked, but fewer hours. I had saved enough to reduce my shifts. I spent more time with Evelyn and the women from the building. I had adopted a cat, an old cat that nobody wanted from the shelter. His name was Rusty, and he sat with me every night on the sofa. Mark and I saw each other every 2 weeks, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes at his apartment. And finally, one day, I invited him to mine. It was strange having him back there, but this time it was different. This time he was my guest. Not someone who lived there, not someone who made decisions about my space. Just a guest, who respected my rules, who valued being there, who understood the privilege it was to walk through that door. We drank coffee. We talked. He looked at the photos on the wall, the same photos Chloe had taken down and that were now back. He asked me about the cat. I told him how I had found him, and at one point in the afternoon, as the sun streamed through the window, I realized something. I had forgiven. Not completely, maybe never completely, but enough. Enough to have a relationship, enough to have peace, enough to move forward. Forgiveness hadn't been a moment. It had been 2 years of small steps, of respected boundaries, of actions that demonstrated change. And now I could finally breathe in the same room as my son without feeling resentment. When Mark left that afternoon, I stood in front of my door. The door with the new locks, the locks that had changed everything. And I thought about the woman I was 2 years ago, scared, invaded, lost in her own home. And I compared her to the woman I was now, strong, independent, the owner of her life. And I smiled. Because sometimes, protecting your peace isn't selfishness, it's survival. And changing the locks was just the beginning of taking my life back. I learned that love doesn't mean putting up with everything. That saying no is an act of self-love. That boundaries don't destroy relationships. Boundaries protect the relationships that deserve to exist. and that sometimes the greatest lesson you can give your children isn't your sacrifice, it's your dignity. That night, as I was making dinner, Rusty rubbed against my legs. Evelyn knocked on my door to invite me to play cards, and my phone buzzed with a message from Mark that said, "Thank you for today, Mom. I love you." And I realized that this was happiness. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, honest, mine. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, and I whispered to myself, sometimes, to get your peace back, it's not the lock that needs to change. It's the people you let in.